Every time Star Citizen has a new feature come online, there's a period where they need to balance things to make it feel the way they intend, to make an impact on gameplay that's meaningful and fun for all players. But one thing that may not initially be clear to people new to Star Citizen's development is that when CIG releases a feature, this is not where they intend to typically leave it. This is just the latest iteration. The next step is us, the players, giving feedback on those features so that they can better improve them in future patches. And this is what makes Star Citizen so great. We are not just people who are experiencing the game, we're helping in development. And so to that end, I wanted to create a video for feedback on the new medical gameplay that's coming online in 3.15 because it's easily one of the most important elements of our first-person experience in the universe that's ever come online. But I also think it's a great opportunity for you guys to interact down below with me in the comment section to provide your thoughts on my feedback and provide some of your own, because we get a lot of cool ideas working together, and I think that will help CIG moving forward to produce a much better medical gameplay system in future patches. But before you hit the comment button down below, keep in mind that constructive feedback, as in specifically why a system is bad, is more helpful than just stating a system is bad. So try to be as detailed as possible when you give feedback. And as always, if you guys like this kind of video and you think I did a good job by the end, make sure not to forget to hit that like and subscribe button and hit the bell icon so you know the next time I post a video. Now, before I give my feedback, I think it's really important to first clarify that the systems that they've put online for 3.15, for dying and dropping your gear and being injured, this is stuff that they've been discussing for many, many years. But many of you, I'm sure, have come on to Star Citizen much later in the development cycle, so you may not have heard of these systems and have become thus used to the existing ones where there are few consequences to any actions. Understandably, many of you are taken aback by this jarring difference between 3.14 and 3.15. But you must understand that these were always planned, and it will continue to change going into the future, to the point where it might not be quite what you expected. But I think that's where you need to maybe do a little bit of research into the game that you're buying before you buy it. I know that's harsh, and I'm going to get a few downvotes for that, but I've been aware of it, and I knew it before I bought it. So now that you guys know and it's out of the way, I hope I'll see only a few of those comments down below, though I'm sure I'll get still a lot of angry people. Alright, so let's move on to the problems with the existing systems, because that really is the focus of the video. Now, understanding that these systems were always planned, I do think that there is a way for CIG to soften the blow of death when you experience it, because the current iteration in game is a little bit confusing and can sometimes be frustrating. And I'm not talking about bugs. Bugs are always frustrating, and there's no way to avoid these until we get into something like Star Citizen Beta, whenever that's gonna happen. The first thing is body recovery. If you die in a bunker, it's pretty easy. You just remember the area where you landed and go back and recover your body on death if nobody was able to save you in time. That way you can get your gear back. However, sometimes you don't die in a place that's marked. And so I think it would be great to have some sort of body marker to be able to go back and recover your body through. Whatever you want to do in lore to explain it, it could be a tracking device on your mobiGlas, I mean, that would make sense. Whatever it is, I feel that we need it. The good news is that I have heard that CIG are planning on adding something like this, but we don't know exactly when that's going to happen. So we'll leave it there. The next problem with the current system is that if you die and then the server 30Ks, or if you crash a desktop on death, your body is virtually gone and unrecoverable because you won't be able to get back on the same server on which you died. So I hope in the event of a 30K or a crash a desktop on death, that in the case of a crash a desktop, that you'd be able to get back into the same server in which you died, where your body would still be available within the time frame that they allot, which I think is 1 hour and 30 minutes. In the event of a 30K, I hope that they could just be a little bit more forgiving with this. Now, I understand that this could potentially be exploited, but I hope that you could at least get your kit returned to you if the server goes down, because ultimately this isn't the player's fault, this is the fault of the server and CIG, and so it creates a more frustrating scenario for those players. Not being able to go back and recover your body because of a server crash is far more frustrating than just losing your stuff because you weren't able to get back in time due to having to fight other players or NPCs. That at least is an understandable part of the mechanic. Well, right now it doesn't matter too much when you lose your kit because none of this stuff is ultimately that valuable. As they start adding more valuable items to loot boxes and unique items to be gained through the reputation system, this is going to become far more of a big deal until we get server meshing. And I'm sure we're going to be getting some cooler stuff in loot boxes between now and persistent server meshing. So I really hope to see something like this come soon. Before I move on to other parts of the medical gameplay system, the last thing I want to talk about death here is about the actual experience of being incapacitated. The biggest problem here really is with the UI. When you die, it's pretty tiny, and it's hard to tell whether or not somebody's accepted your beacon when you've put one out. I think that it'd be a lot better if this text were bigger, more clear, and if when you've put out a beacon and it's been accepted, that they show the name of the person who's accepted it and how far they are from your current position. Additionally, it would be ideal if it would automatically invite that individual to your party. That way, you could share the mission, or the mission could be automatically shared, so that in the case of a bunker like this, the friendly AI doesn't shoot the rescuing player because they see them as an intruder. Without these things, it's hard for the player to wait because they don't know how long it's going to take for that individual to get there. And so they may feel it's faster to cancel the beacon after some duration of time and just go back to get their body themselves. In the interim, the person who's on their way ends up wasting their time because the person who's meant to be saved has canceled their medical beacon, which is even more frustrating. On the flip side of things, if you've accepted a medical beacon, it would also be nice to be able to see how much time that person has left, and to perhaps even have a brief description of their injuries, because in the future, if there's more stuff added to the gameplay for how you can heal things, this could also be important information. Next, I want to talk about the tools themselves used to go rescue people. The biggest problem I have with them right now is that there really isn't a significant enough difference between the multi-tool attachment and the med gun to warrant the existence of the multi-tool attachment. While the multi-tool does have an extra 100 milliliters of this fluid for healing, it doesn't really give it an advantage that makes it more appealing than the med gun itself. It just feels like an inferior device. While yes, you could argue that its utility makes it more attractive because you can swap out the components, this really isn't that impactful when you can just as easily quickly swap it out from your inventory between a multi-tool if you need a tractor beam and the med gun, which has far more versatility. Because if you don't know, the med gun can actually administer drugs in addition to the healing Hemazole, whereas the multi-tool can only do the Hemazole, which just heals and doesn't mask any injuries. I think it would be far more interesting into the advantage of CIG if they were to make it an interesting alternative as opposed to an obviously inferior device. What I mean is that the multi-tool should have some advantage perhaps over the med gun that negates the fact that it's just inferior. For example, it could have a greater range or be able to apply the Hemazole far more quickly than you could with the med gun. This advantage, I think, would counterbalance the versatility of the med gun to make it an attractive alternative. Onto the med gun itself, it's got a pretty major flaw in the way that it's been designed. The automatic mode negates the need to use the manual mode at any time because if there is an injury detected, it will automatically administer the drugs required to mask that injury. This makes that manual mode pretty useless unless you want to pre-med. I'd rather have it be only manual mode for administering any drugs for treatment. That way there's more skill and knowledge involved on the part of the healer than there is right now. But perhaps above all else, the most important problem that I encountered was with the tiered injuries. I tested these many times through many different patches through this PTU cycle, and virtually 100% of everything I tested, players always went down before they experienced a tiered injury, which means that the experience that you have is that either you're 100% well or you're dead. There's no in between. And so this kind of makes having these tiered injuries somewhat pointless unless you're constantly being revived and healed, which many players won't experience because many players play alone. Furthermore, it's only until tier 2 that you start to actually experience any detrimental effects from that injury. And even then, those injuries are so incredibly unnoticeable that they have almost still no impact on gameplay. This means that stuff like getting a body to the clinic to be healed really doesn't ever happen in gameplay. Nobody's actually testing it because it's not happening to them. In order for these effects to really become noticeable and impact gameplay heavily, we need to start experiencing these tiered injuries before we die, and rather quickly. The threshold for having a tier 1, 2, or 3 injury on an arm, leg, body, or head needs to be a few shots, not 10 shots and then you die and then maybe you get that tiered injury. It just doesn't seem to make any sense that they spent so much time developing these animations, the functions surrounding them, the clinics, even the gurneys, only to make it so hard to experience that virtually no players are actually experiencing them. Now, I want to be clear here. Overall, I'm extremely happy with these new systems. They're not that bad, but there are some glaring issues with their balance that, if tweaked, could make them a heck of a lot better. And hopefully some of my solutions have given you guys some inspiration to share your own, because certainly my solutions aren't the end-all be-all. They're maybe not necessarily even that good. I'm sure you guys have some better ones that CIG could benefit from, and just the discussion itself I think will yield some really interesting results. So I'm looking forward to reading your comments down below, and of course, as I always say at the end of my videos, I really hope to see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.